Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Esther Manheimer. I'm the mayor of the city of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the October 19th, 2023 agenda briefing work session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website or via the live stream. The live meeting will be available on Charter Spectrum channel 193. You may also listen to the meeting via phone, 855-925-2801, and the meeting code is 2764. And with all agenda briefing work sessions, we do not take public comment. Council and staff, please unmute yourselves and say a quick hello when I call your name. Vice Mayor Sandra Kilgore.
Good morning, everyone.
Councilwoman Sage Turner.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Shanika Smith.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Antoinette Mosley.
Hello.
Councilwoman Kim Roney.
Good morning.
Councilwoman Maggie Ullman.
Hello, everybody.
And our city staff, City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Rachel Wood.
Good morning.
Assistant City Manager Ben Woody.
Good morning.
City Attorney Brad Branham.
Good morning.
And City Clerk Maggie Burleson.
Good morning.
And I'll now turn it over to the City Manager Deborah Campbell.
Thank you. And again, good morning, everybody. We have an interesting agenda. We have a lot on the City Council agenda, including several public hearings. We don't have a whole lot of council committee meetings, just one that we will review. Then we'll review the 8-week agenda. And then on the other issues and updates, we've got 2 items, Code Purple and short-term shelter strategy. And the last one, ARPA funding, we're going to ask for a little bit of guidance and direction in terms of a process to determine how we utilize those remaining funds. I believe that Rachel Wood, Assistant City Manager, will be reviewing the City Council agenda. And if there are no further questions, I will turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning, Mayor and City Council. As Deborah mentioned, we do anticipate having some pretty significant discussion under some of the public hearing items, as well as new business items. So I am going to go relatively quickly through the consent agenda, just highlighting a few items. But of course, if you have questions on any items I do not cover, please feel free to either raise your hand or chime in and let me know that you have some questions on items that I do not cover in my initial overview. Before I get to the consent agenda, I do want to note that we've got a proclamation. October 2023 will be named as Sister Cities Month, and Jessica Cofield with Sister Cities will be at the meeting to accept the proclamation. Also wanted to note that we do not have a scheduled work session for the October 24 City Council meeting. Moving into the consent agenda, I'll briefly highlight item B. Item B is approximately $1.2 million design contract with CDM Smith Incorporated to replace approximately 26,000 feet of aging water lines throughout various neighborhoods within the Water Resources Service area. This is part of our ongoing commitment to maintain the water distribution system, and it is funded through our existing water CIP. I'm going to move on to item F. Item F is a budget amendment in the amount of $1.4 million to the Heritage Cherokee Center Capital Fund from the Enterprise Fund balance. And the intent of this is to make the needed repairs that Chris Corral covered with you at your September 26th work session so that the facility can be fully operational. If this action is approved, work will begin, and we are anticipating a spring 2023, potentially March 2023 date to have Thomas Wolf back in working order. Moving on to item H, I just want to note that Emily Ball, as Deborah already mentioned, is going to provide an overview under other issues where she will highlight Code Purple, as well as some updates to the short-term shelter strategy. So I'm not going to cover that right now because you'll get a more detailed presentation from Emily momentarily. Then I'm going to move to item I. Item I is a two-part item that includes a budget amendment and supplemental grant agreement with the North Carolina Department of Transportation in support of the Greenway Connector project. This project provides connections between 3 different greenways, Bowcatcher, Nasty Branch, and connecting to the southern trailhead of the future Bacote Branch Greenway on Clingman Extension. We received previous grant funding in the amount of $1.05 million and had a corresponding city match for the project of $262,500. That's already been appropriated. We are now receiving additional grant funds totaling $356,800, and we have already budgeted for an $89,200 match. The project is nearing completion of design, and construction is anticipated to begin shortly with an estimated late summer, early fall 2024 completion for this project. I am not going to read off all of the street names, but did want to highlight under item J that there are a number of speed limit changes. Some of those are NCDOT initiated, and some of them are on city streets. We have a number of city streets where the speed limit is being reduced to 20 miles per hour. And then we also have some that are being changed to 25 miles per hour. And I'll just note that for the city streets, the effective date is when the signs are installed, and the transportation department is working with our communications and public and engagement team to make sure that residents on those streets are notified prior to those changes going into effect. I'll then highlight item M. Item M is a contract with Frank L. Bloom Construction Company in association with WC Construction Company in the amount of $92,435 for the McCormick Field pre-construction services. By way of a quick reminder, the McCormick project is going to be delivered using the construction delivery methodology of Construction Manager at Risk, also known as CMAR. One of the key advantages of using this method is following completion of the design, the city and the CMAR firm then agree to a guaranteed maximum price, also referred to as a GMP. Having a CMAR firm on board for pre-construction services ensures that they have an opportunity to review and provide input on the design with our design firm. For this project, the firm is Ewing Cole, so that they can confirm constructability and arrive at a fair, guaranteed maximum price. After that GMP is established, much of the financial risk is shifted from the city to the CMAR firm because they're responsible for cost overruns if the GMP is exceeded. Item M just went up, excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Mosley.
If possible, can I get any information regarding the process for the McCormick Field construction manager at risk, please?
Sure, we can include that in follow-up materials leading up to Tuesday. And then moving on to item N, just want to note that this is amending the 2023 City Council meeting schedule to add 2 work sessions. The first on November 14th, starting at 3:30 p.m. There will be part 2 of the facilities assessment presentation from Walter Ear and Jay Dundas. And then on November 12th, also starting at 3:30, the finance team will be leading City Council through a CIP development process for the fiscal year 2025 CIP, and also have a conversation, an initial conversation with council on GEO bond planning. Moving down to presentations and reports, under the city manager's report, we only have 1 planned item to discuss with you on Tuesday, and that is the first quarter fiscal year 2024 financial report. This will be delivered by the finance team and will be closely mirrored to the presentation that was recently delivered to the Policy, Finance, and HR Committee. Now going to move into public hearings. The first item is a public hearing amending the city's 2020 through 2024 consolidated plan with the Housing and Urban with HUD. The public hearing includes 3 key revisions to our HUD consolidated plan, and those include, first, allowing Helpmate to expand the footprint of housing service funds to be spent in Buncombe County. They're currently restricted to spend those funds within the city limits, and the intent of this expansion would just to be improving the likelihood of identifying affordable housing options for Helpmate clients. This will also assist Helpmate with their timeliness and their ability to spend those CDBG dollars because there are more options in the county rather than within the city limits. Second is an amendment allowing Homeward Bound to expand the use of their existing home tenant-based rental assistance funds from solely being used for permanent supportive housing to also include rapid rehousing to better meet the different housing needs of the community's unsheltered population. And then the third component of this amendment to the HUD consolidated plan is authorizing the use of $300,000 in CDBG funds that need to be reallocated and fully expended by April 2024 in order to meet HUD timeliness requirements. And the plan would be to use those funds to support a downtown sidewalk and accessibility project on Patton Avenue. Yes, Councilmember Roney.
Thank you for that part about Patton Avenue. There were some questions at the Urban Forestry Commission meeting about this one. We have multiple competing uses on our sidewalk in that stretch, utilities, public use of the right of way by small businesses, and we have some pretty tremendous accessibility issues that were identified in the GAP plan. What I did understand from staff at our Urban Forestry Commission meeting is that there was going to be a return presentation after a community meeting. So in follow-up materials, could we maybe get a summary of how that community meeting went?
Yes, we can. Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
I guess since this is on consent, this is really the only time I'll be able to voice this, and I may ask it to be pulled.
And just a correction, Councilmember Turner, it's a public hearing.
Oh, I'm
So
sorry, it is public hearing. I looked in the wrong place. Okay, great. Well, and I guess I've already raised this concern, but I'll just share it again. I understand that this amount of money can be used for sidewalks through CDBG, and our new development director, I don't know his complete title, did a great run through at HCD the other day of how CDBG works, the whole program, kind of like nuts and bolts. So if you're curious at all, that is a great one to go watch. But I still want to voice concern about using this funding, some of which is public service and some of which is not, for a sidewalk in the current state of housing crisis that we're in, because traditionally what we've been doing is using it for a variety of services around, like whether it's Pisgah or Hayward Street Congregation for respite beds, Helpmate for emergency rehousing. There's all these kind of things that we normally do. So I just want to raise a concern around using it for sidewalks, but I will speak to that on Tuesday as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Turner, and staff will provide additional details as part of the presentation on the public hearing. The primary driver for the recommendation that staff is making to use these dollars for this sidewalk project surrounds timeliness. So as I mentioned, we need to have the funds fully expended and the project completed by April 2024 in order to meet those HUD requirements. Nikki Reed and Dennis Newburn at the council meeting on Tuesday will provide additional details around the constraints associated with that timing, as well as the impact of potential future CDBG dollars if we don't meet those timeliness concerns.
Rachel, I had requested that we show what we allocated the funding for the last couple cycles. Could those documents be ready for council too?
Yes, those are actually attached with the staff report. So when the agenda publishes, that will be available as a link. And we'll also include that information in the slides for Tuesday.
Thank you.
Are there, just piggybacking on that, are there things that the city can fund with CDBG that could qualify to be completely expended, completed, whatever the parameters were that Rachel said, by April of 2024? I mean, Sage just mentioned a bunch of things, but are any of those possible?
We've done a relatively detailed assessment, and staff's assessment is that we do not think we will be able to have the contracts in place and the funds fully expended by that April 2024 deadline. And that is our primary reason for having the recommendation to spend the funds in-house on a sidewalk project. But we'll have additional details at the council meeting on Tuesday.
Okay, and it sounds like, Sage, you're not entirely convinced of that. So it'd be helpful if you had some ideas about things that you think we should be spending the money on instead, so staff can kind of run that up the flagpole and see if it works.
Sure. And I mean, even just looking at what we allocated earlier this year, it was case management stuff for survivors. It was housing services, Habitat's home repair program. We did something with, I think, Spark Foundation, Homeward Bound, or what was it? Carolina Small Business Development was on the list. I mean, we just did a lot. So whether or not staff is saying maybe I don't know if we'd have an application period and like all that stuff that would slow it down, or if there is already something in queue that's an ask that could be funded. But from what I understood the HCD presentation, it wouldn't cover things like the days in gap because of a requirement to study that option ahead of the construction start or something. There's some legal jargon there. So that kind of ask, which is in front of us, would not qualify for these funds. And I think staff will have a good presentation considering what I already saw. But I just know there's a pressing need in the community. There's ongoing dire need for home repair help and assistance, and emergency utilities in the winter comes up. I mean, I would think that partners could rapidly deploy this if they were given the chance, but we don't really know.
I guess this is Kim here. The only thing I haven't heard explicitly is eviction protection funds, and I know that we're having conversations about evictions, but do we have an identified need, especially as we're anticipating winter, and it seems that we could use that pretty quickly.
We can certainly have the community and economic development team do an assessment and include details on that feasibility on Tuesday for eviction protection funds.
And again, I just want to, this is Deborah, reiterate that staff did as much due diligence as we could as it relates to housing. We understand what the need is. Unfortunately, we have needs that need to be addressed for a lot of issues within our community, and infrastructure and addressing our ADA rules and guidelines are among the top also, in addition to housing.
Thank you for mentioning that, Deborah. And just to remind the group, and again, this will be detailed further in the presentation on Tuesday, but the portion of Patton Avenue that's being recommended is actually the top priority on our ADA transition plan that was adopted last October as part of the GAP plan. So moving on, oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Roney.
Yeah, just for clarity, I know that y'all have done due diligence on this, and the only reason I brought up the urban forestry is because there was a suggestion that there might be more follow-up. I certainly appreciate that we're prioritizing ADA. I just think that it's also our due diligence to make sure that we do everything that we can around housing concerns. So thank you, Sage.
Well, thank you for the feedback. I'm now going to let Ben Woody cover the next few public hearing items.
Morning, Mayor, Council, Ben Woody, Assistant City Manager. We have a number of planning-related public hearing items. So I just want to acknowledge I've also asked Stephanie Dahl and Chris Collins to be on the call. So if there are any technical questions that I'm not able to answer, I feel certain that Stephanie and Chris will be able to. So with that, I'm going to start with public hearing item B, which is consideration of the adoption of the South Side Neighborhood Vision Plan. Real quick, since it last came to council, I want to review some of the recent changes to the plan that were based on feedback and staff working with the community. In late summer 2022 and spring 2023, several adjacent neighborhood organizations, including legacy neighborhoods, voiced some concerns about several aspects of the plan and how it may negatively impact them. Those concerns included potential development heights on the edges of the study area, that the plan was committing the city to rezone specific districts, in a manner that may negatively impact the neighborhoods, and that the plan would encourage new development that was being, or that could encroach into the neighborhoods. Additionally, there was some concern from the neighborhoods about the labeling included in the plan. I think kind of the term South Slope is more of a newly acquired naming or terminology for that area of the city. And of course, historically, that area has been part of the East End Valley Street neighborhood and the South Side neighborhood. So I think that labeling and recognition was also important to the neighborhood groups that are either in or adjacent to this planning area. In order to address those concerns, staff has went into the planning document and made technical changes in terms of making sure that it wasn't intended to have incompatible development encroach into the neighborhoods, as well as clarifying some of the labeling and language that was included in the draft plan. Staff has done those changes in consultation with those neighborhood groups. They have went back out and met with those neighborhood groups. To the best of our knowledge, the neighborhood participants have expressed satisfaction with the recent round of changes. So we now think it's ready to bring back to council for consideration next week. Just a quick recap, Planning and Economic Development discussed this plan in April of 2022. The Downtown Commission heard the plan in June of 2022 and recommended adoption. Additionally, Planning and Zoning Commission considered the plan at their August meeting in 2022, and they too recommended adoption. So with that, I'll stop there to see if there are any questions that Steph or I can answer on the South Slope Vision Plan, or South Side Vision Plan, excuse me. Councilwoman Mosley.
Not a question, but I just want to reiterate that at least what I've heard from two of the neighborhoods nearby is they're very appreciative of the outreach, and not just the outreach, but actually listening to their proposals and altering the plan to take those proposals into consideration. So it's really a thank you for the work.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. And I obviously want to recognize Stephanie Dahl for her leadership and work and doing that and reaching out to the neighborhood. So thank you, Stephanie. Okay, if nothing else on public hearing item B, I'm going to move to the next one, which is a conditional zoning request at 30 Buchanan Place, which is the location of McCormick Field, which is where, of course, the city and the Asheville Tourists host minor league baseball games. The McCormick Field site is 8.25 acres. You know, of course, that building has been there for a long time, and that's been the site of baseball for many years. As part of the recent proposed renovations and work to McCormick Field, which is a $30 million renovation of the field, that includes a lot of work on the interior facilities there and upfit work that maybe not everybody would see, but it's important to be done. Also includes a new clubhouse building on the southern side of the property, enhanced outdoor seating on the northern side of the property, and of course, an expanded concourse and entrance area at the western side of the property. So given the extent and value of these renovations, it's a huge renovation project. The site is required to come into full compliance with their zoning requirements. Of course, this site was built many, many years ago, probably when there wasn't zoning requirements. And so some of those compliance issues do create some infeasible technical challenges that exist at that site. And so what this conditional zoning does is allows for some flexibility or variation in some of those requirements. Most of the challenges result from either the geography of the site or actual physical constraints that result from the original siting of the stadium. So real quickly, the conditional zoning is being proposed to provide the technical modifications. I'm gonna highlight a couple of things. One is it would allow the maximum building height of 60 feet where otherwise it would be limited to 40 feet. And again, that reflects a lot of what's existing in terms of height at that facility. Elimination of required building setbacks, elimination of required landscaping buffers adjacent to residential zoning districts. A big one is the reduction of the minimum required parking spaces. Currently, there is 34 spaces provided on site. Our ordinance actually requires 1,000 on-site parking spaces. Also, there's some limitations in the current ordinance about the location of parking not being in the front yard setback, which we do have parking there. And then finally, there are some requirements for kind of internal landscape screening and material requirements that aren't practical to meet. So what this conditional zoning does is propose those technical modifications to allow the renovation to continue. Planning and Zoning Commission actually heard this rezoning last night, and they did recommend its approval. Any questions on this conditional zoning?
And Ben, could you talk a little bit about our outreach to the community? When we first heard about this, that we would need to do it, we did immediately started outreach.
Yep, good point. Thank you for that, Deborah. So typically with any conditional zoning, a couple things happen is there's a neighborhood meeting that occurs, and of course there's a notice that goes out to property owners within a certain amount of distance, and all those things happen as they're required to do. But additionally, the staff working on this, so it's the planning department, it's capital projects, it's Chris Corl's group. They did a lot of effort, a lot of kind of above and beyond to meet individually with neighbors, to attend neighborhood meetings, and just to make sure that the residents and the neighbors, number one, had access to this process, and number two, reviewed why the changes are necessary and what impacts those may have, and what are things we can do as a city along with the tourists to try to address those. So there was definitely fairly, the minimum requirements are met, but I would say that the staff tried to go above and beyond to make sure that neighbors had access to this process.
So can you go over some of the concerns related to parking that I believe maybe two folks expressed last night, but I do know that those concerns were still prevalent amongst both associations. Can you just explain that a little more? What they're concerned?
Yeah, I'm going to ask if Chris or Stephanie can get a little bit deeper into some of those concerns maybe, and how that's being handled.
I will start. Hi, this is Steph Dahl. Thanks for giving me a moment to talk about this. Some of the specific concerns that we've been hearing, they might not necessarily have to deal with tourist game days. Actually, the community that we heard from really think that they're doing a pretty good job of managing parking. But there are complications, is that this is an entire recreation district, and we have events that are at Memorial Stadium. We have sports that happen in the area, and people are parking in the neighborhoods, which is legal. We do have a resident parking tag program that is sometimes being used. But the bottom line is that people would like to have additional enforcement, and that's what the parking plan is trying to address. If you watched Planning and Zoning Commission last night, it was brought up that it is actually the Pee Wee football games that are the biggest concern for members of the community. And so we're trying to work across events and staff people by using this parking plan, which is included in the conditional, the conditions, the B1 conditions, to help address the community's concerns about it. So there's kind of broader concerns, but mostly the specific ones for a few neighbors are people are parking in front of my house and things are clogging up on specific game days. Is there any more clarification that I could provide?
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about the tree canopy conditions that are being proposed.
I'm going to ask Chris to answer that part, but my understanding is that we actually are meeting our tree canopy requirements. That's the issue, is the modification for buffering. And the modification for buffering is required for us to be able to actually build out the facility on the right field wall. So that was went over last night at Planning and Zoning. And what I can tell you is that they came up with a request that is now going to be included in the conditions to the extent feasible for the city to work with their partners on this project to develop a vegetative screening on that wall in lieu of the buffer. For tree canopy protection, we do. Chris, you want to follow up on that?
You're 100% right. The condition that's in there is really just a reemphasis because often tree canopy comes up at this conceptual level. But since it's not addressed, the project will meet, excuse me, all tree canopy requirements as required by Article 19 when it comes through for final development approval. And they do intend to meet that all on site. It is a 15% requirement in their resource management district.
So they're meeting the requirement, and in doing so, there will be a reduction of tree canopy, but it's still meeting the requirement we've all agreed on before.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on public hearing item C? Seeing none, I will move on to public hearing item D, which is a resident petition for a UDO amendment to revise our cottage development standards. Cottage development standards is a section of the UDO that doesn't get a lot of utilization. I think there's some, but not a lot. It's been in place really for a number of years, and I think it's even been modified a couple of times over that period. It allows cottage developments in the RS8, the RM8, RM8, RM16, and RM6. Sorry to go out of order on that, but it allows it in 3 multifamily zoning districts and 1 single family zoning districts. So what this amendment does, the petition, it reduces the minimum number of cottages from 5 to 2. So it'll allow really smaller parcels of land or lower density developments to utilize the cottage development standards. It eliminates the 200-foot separation between cottage developments, and it eliminates a clause that prevents or that orients cottages toward the primary street. So a little more flexibility in terms of siting the cottage homes. A couple of things about the cottage ordinance development is there are limitations on the structure size. So individual structures have a 1,200 square foot footprint limitation or maximum footprint, and then a 1,400 square foot maximum gross floor area. So these are very compact and small development types. Additionally, just to note, within the RS district, there's one RS district, RS8, that allows these types of developments. Landowners are already able to build a primary residence and an accessory dwelling unit. So in a lot of respects, if those 2 units were cottage home developments under that ordinance, not necessarily a lot different than if the landowner chose to do an ADU in terms of the form of the development. So kind of given the structure size limitations that are in place for cottage developments and the limited number of zoning districts this applies to, staff doesn't believe this proposal would create any substantial impact on density within those 4 or 5 zoning districts or within neighborhoods or in terms of compatibility. Real quickly, the UDO does not allow ADUs and cottage development. So if you choose to do an ADU in a structure, that's what you'll need to do. If you choose to do a cottage development that results in 2 dwellings, that's what you'll need to do. So you can't kind of mix between the 2. One thing I'll note on this is the UDO does not require specific public engagement for resident proposed text amendments. So this just goes through the typical public hearing process from P&Z to City Council. This particular amendment really proposes pretty minor technical changes to the development ordinance, and so staff is supporting this moving forward. It went to Planning and Zoning Commission at their August meeting, and Planning and Zoning recommended approval by a 3-to-1 vote. And so I'll pause there to see if there are any questions on the cottage development amendment.
The only question I've gotten about this one is what is the process for residents making UDO amendment suggestions? So maybe that could be in a follow-up document.
We can certainly address that in a follow-up document. We have another resident initiated text memo that we're going to cover next. And maybe that's just, I'll take a second and ask Chris or Stephanie just to maybe cover what the UDO requires in terms of a resident submitted text amendment. We'll go ahead and answer that and see if we can have one less thing on the follow-up document maybe.
Yeah, this is Steph, and I admit I don't have the UDO open in front of me, so I'm not going to answer this at this time unless Chris wants to chime in. Has it open?
I do have it open at a really high level. The UDO creates an opening in section 773 for either the city to initiate a text amendment or a or a citizen. And it does not outline a process, but it does provide the expectation that the next step is Planning and Zoning Commission scheduled at least 30 days after submission. So there's not a lot of guidance in there right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And I'll just note generally that the option of a resident submitted text amendment is not unique to Asheville. That exists in all cities and counties, just like there's the option for a resident to submit a zoning amendment as well. So to the map. Any other questions on public hearing item D, cottage lots? Okay, I will move on to my last public hearing item E, which is another resident submitted amendment to the UDO, and this particular item revises the city's flag lot standards. The original amendment did a couple of things, and I'm going to cover those. So when the petition came in, it proposed to reduce the minimum width of the pole portion of the flag lot from 20 feet to 5 feet. And the pole would be the access that a person would use to go to the lot. Typically, a flag lot is positioned behind the lot that is on the street frontage. And the pole represents, think about a flagpole, represents the rear lot's access to the street and their street frontage. We do require lots, and most places do, to have typically some kind of street frontage. So the reduction initially was to reduce the pole from 20 feet to 5 feet. To allow the flagpole portion of the lot to be used as calculating the minimum lot area. Typically that portion is kind of a no person's land. It doesn't really get calculated in the lot area. Removal of the requirement for occupied buildings on the flag lot to have a gravity service sewer line. Removal of the limitation limiting the use of flag lots to 1 flag lot per 8 lots in a subdivision of 8 or fewer lots, and no more than 2 lots or 10% of the lots in any subdivision. So what that means is typically the city has limits on how many flag lots you can create as part of a development. This amendment proposed to remove those limits. And then finally, this amendment proposed eliminating the front yard setback for a flag lot. So again, that would be, think about the dwelling that's on the rear lot. It would propose to remove the setback or the distance that dwelling could be from the front property line of that rear lot. Moving forward, since the submission of this, staff worked with the applicant to address several technical issues with the proposed amendment. At the time, staff had concerns with the reduction of the flagpole width, the elimination of the number of flag lots overall, so the cap, and then the elimination of the front yard setback requirements for flag lots. So those are the 3 concerns that staff had. Those outstanding issues have generally been addressed between staff and the applicant, with the exception of the flagpole width. Still not agreement on that. So staff's proposal for that was to recommend an alternative amendment for council. Staff feels like there's only so much that you can reduce the flagpole width. So that's an area where there's not concurrence between the applicant and the staff. In advance of the public hearing scheduled for Tuesday, which is coming up, staff and probably council has as well, but staff has received a number of concerns from some of the neighborhoods and neighborhood groups. Again, just will note on these resident text amendments, there's not a prescribed engagement process. So I think as neighborhoods have become more aware of this, they have reached out to planning staff with some concerns about the potential impacts of these changes. In order to provide some additional time to try and address these concerns, planning staff in consultation with our legal department and city manager's office is requesting council's consideration of a continuance of this agenda item in order to allow further community education engagement, also to allow some time to hopefully address some of the concerns that we're hearing from residents and neighborhoods, and then to try and educate and engage the community about potential impacts of this request. And Chris touched on this a little bit. There's not a prescribed path for these types of amendments. And while this isn't a typical step in the UDO text amendment process, another option council could consider is also sending this back to one of the council committees to have some additional evaluation of potential impacts of this text amendment. Real quickly, just to note, this went to Planning and Zoning Commission in August. That body recommended approval on a 3-to-1 vote. They also asked that the technical review committee take another look at this. They wanted the technical staff to look at this. PRC heard this at their August 21st meeting. They continued the item. TRC took another look at this at their September 18th meeting. The TRC recommended the alternative amendment on a 4-to-1 vote with 3 departments abstaining. It did go to the Neighborhood Advisory Committee on October 23rd, at which time the NAC heard a report on this amendment. And so all that brings us to our meeting today, and I will stop. We already have questions, so I will stop there. Certainly, we'll probably need Stephanie and Chris to help me answer questions. And I think Councilwoman Roney, I believe you had your hand up first.
Thank you, Ben. I sent the Urban Forestry Commission's recommendation included in their October meeting to postpone this. It's not just neighborhoods that I'm hearing concern about. I'm also hearing it from developers and construction industry folks. And so I guess my question is, why do it separately from our missing middle housing study? Is there a potential strength of moving them forward together, or am I missing something?
And just to piggyback real quick, can you remind us what the timing of the missing middle study is? Because I had questions around that too, but I'm not familiar on the latest timing of the study.
And I'll take that. So right now, we are looking for that draft for the missing middle housing report to be out in about a month from now. So it's not a long time between council consideration of this and the potential consideration for the community, at least, to look at the draft. We wouldn't be bringing that to council necessarily until we have significant community input on missing middle, which could look like January. Regarding whether or not missing middle should be used as context, that is one of the things that staff has noted. Both the community and staff believe that it could provide valuable context, especially considering that the recommendations both for the citizen-led text amendment and that study deal with residential zoning districts and what that should look like moving forward to support more housing choices. So that is a great consideration for council to make.
Councilwoman Kilgore.
Yes, I just wanted to add a little bit more information for the flag lot. And I will say that I can understand the resident that put that forward as to why. Being working in the real estate business over 30 years and also here in Asheville, I can see that it can definitely be something that could actually help increase housing for the community. It is something that basically what I find, there's a need for it in the community, especially, I would say, in some of the legacy communities. At present, I have 2 listings, which basically those listings are properties that are sort of, one is a flat lot, but it does have the width that's qualified, that qualifies it for it, which is probably, I think, around 53 is this particular lot. So I don't have to, worry about getting it approved. This person that is doing this is because they needed the additional money to take care of personal expenses, whether it's to improve the actual existing home so they can stay in it and be able to make the additional funds from selling that lot, or a lot of times from using that additional lot to subsidize, say, a mother-in-law suite for an elderly parent. The flat lot situation, by doing this, what happens, you're able to deed the property separately. By doing this deeding separately, that means that a lot of times only the wealthy people have been able to do the ADUs because you had to pretty much pay cash or have the money to do it. They could not get to financing. The flat lot allows people to be able to have a separate lot that's deeded to be able to get a loan to do certain things on it as far as building or whatever. So therefore, as far as in the Black community and Lex community before, they're stuck because they did not have the funds to do it. A lot of the lots that are designed here in Asheville, basically 50 foot road frontage is very commonplace. And the lots, even though they're 50 in width, the length, they go down double. They're usually something like 100, which means that you've got 2 lots there, but you can only do something with the other lot, and the other land sits there vacant unless you have the money to put an ADU. And like I said, I have 2 lots right on the market, basically for people, minority people in my community that basically utilize this to actually, like I said, subsidize income to fix up that existing house so they can continue to live in it, or either to subsidize additional expenses that have made it come up. So I just wanted to sort of lay that out there and sort of give you an idea of what the lots, a lot of the lots look like, and the loss of land in the back part that could be utilized for density and affordable housing.
Thank you, Councilwoman Kilgore and Councilwoman Mosley.
I just wanted to point out, and then correct me if I'm mistaken, but I thought one of the letters of opposition we received was actually from a legacy neighborhood. And it was my understanding that there was going to be a meeting of all the legacy neighborhoods to provide feedback. Was that not the letter I looked at from the Shiloh community in particular? Or was it another?
That is correct.
Yeah, and I can understand that. And I can understand that because people, it's really, it's a matter of understanding exactly what the purpose is and what it actually can do. One of the lots I have listed right now is in the Shiloh area. And I understand that, like I said, you'll have people looking at it from all different, perspectives. I can understand that. They will be. But once you sort of explain and present the benefits and the options available, it may sometimes actually sort of give them more clarity as to making decisions. So
it would be helpful for me if we could, assuming we don't, because the request is to push this off a little bit anyway, right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
It would be very helpful to me if we could actually get thoughts from legacy neighborhoods in particular about this particular issue.
Yeah, I think so too. Without a doubt, I think so. Without a doubt, I just think that more information is better for presenting these things.
Sage has got a question. I've got
Yeah.
a question after Sage goes.
It's not so much a question, it's just concern around the process of this, because I know we put it to committee and pulled it from committee, and timeliness is coming to mind. I appreciate we'll get more input. We could have already been working on that, so I just kind of want to speak to our process on this because I feel like it was a little messy. And I would hope that we can do better. You know, I feel that housing is our number one concern. Affordability, access, home ownership continues to creep up. We're becoming more and more of a rental community. And these flag lots they correlate directly to ownership. So we can't say, you know, let's build flag lots just for locals. I wish we could. But flag lots, what separates them is now that they can be deeded separately. They can be owned separately. And it's been a long, ongoing issue with the ADU rules that we have. We don't build as many ADUs as most communities because of this issue. The financing around them is really stringent, really hard to get. You either have to have money, cash, or a significant amount of equity to build them. And so this is kind of a workaround, but it also means it can be for sale. So it's an option for growing home ownership opportunities in the community. If we were ever able to restrict them to certain incomes, that would be wonderful, but we don't really have that play here. So I do hope that this continues to move forward, and getting more input doesn't sound like a bad idea, but let's get real clear about our process. I think having us speak to, you know, having Chris mention, like, there's really not an outline process for this. Maybe we need one, you know, or maybe it's just identified that some committees are part of it. Because I know this was on PED, probably would have been helpful. These things might have come up, but, you know, let's shore up process and keep this moving, but let's also get some input. And I'm looking at this one a lot because I feel like it can be a bit of a game changer. The numbers I heard were in the thousands of available lots, you know, and maybe we can get it right and get some good input and keep moving quickly.
Exactly. Thank you.
Councilwoman Turner, real quickly, I know there's others. I just want to respond. You are right. We need to have a better defined process so everybody understands the expectations. And that is something that Stephanie and Chris have already identified is they want to work on that. So we obviously want to be in sync with our applicants, with our neighbors, with our elected officials. So totally agree with you. We need to do better. And then I just want to say, in fairness to the applicant, there are time considerations that person is working under, but they have also been willing to meet. So the applicant is, I just want to say, they're not resistant to meeting, and they haven't been. So I want to acknowledge the applicant has been open to that all along. So
let me just share one final thought too, because when I was on AHAC for a long time, we were so concerned about how we were not getting any affordable housing built that we would host a series of developers, bankers, lenders, a whole like get together meeting once a year and say, guys, what are you seeing? You're the builder. What are you seeing? Oh, you're running into a plumbing issue. Let's talk about that. And that's when we started seeing Ben come to AHAC as DSD manager at the time, because we wanted to see the overlap. We wanted to see how we could expedite. So we used to get that input and seek it out. And what's happened is I think we've stopped. And now what we're getting are these sideline conversations from the people out there working in the field. Because let's be clear, this is an affordable housing developer that's brought it. They only build affordable housing. So without seeking that input on what we could be doing better, we're hearing it on these outlying kind of input sessions. They come to us in these approval methods that are outside our own process. So maybe what we need to do is kind of get back to the drawing board of like seeking that input regularly so they come through a better process. Just a little history there on how we used to do it.
I was just going to say a couple of things on the process. It's pretty difficult if it's not staff or council initiated code amendment, because it might be something we're really interested in, like this one, or it might be something like really crazy that staff spends a lot of time on before it even gets to council and we're not interested in it at all. So there's got to be some way to do a temperature check. I know I've worked in some cities where they do kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down in front of the council right off the bat, and staff, and they can direct staff whether they want like the full treatment or not in terms of the outreach in the community. So just some thoughts about process. I know you guys will work on that. The other is while we're talking about accessory dwelling units, I don't know if everybody saw, but the Federal Housing Administration just announced a new policy that they're going to allow for more leniency in being able to finance. Yay, yes. So there has been this big roadblock for people to be able to get financing to build ADUs. So that may make some difference, hopefully, out there on ADUs. You can use the rental income to count towards the income needed to support the mortgage payment on it. So that'll be a big deal. And then Staff, if we decide not to move forward with this now, we're going to go into the community and get more feedback. One of the things I'm interested in, I think the traditional thinking around a flag lot and what might apply, say, like in a neighborhood like Shiloh, is that you already have an existing house that's right up on the road and they're looking to build for a flag lot that'll put a house behind. But I've been spending every Thursday walking in Oakley because I have a kid playing soccer over there. And I've noticed a bunch of flag lots over there that are the opposite. The original house is actually on a pretty large lot, maybe 4 acres or something, and it's set way back. And because it's like, because it was like a farm or something at one point. And the original house is old. It's like the older 1950s probably. And they have made their lot the flag lot and carved off front parcels for new home construction that front the road. So it's like the flip of this. So in terms of, what Sandra's talking about and affordability of people being able to leverage their property to create more money for themselves because they want to stay there and live there. I'd just be interested if we're seeing a lot of those. I don't know how much data we track around that or how this potential change could impact that sort of flip scenario. And then finally, I did look through the proposal and the staff's recommendations. I do have major concerns about a flagpole that's only 5 feet in width. That to me is only possible if you are building the front lot and the rear lot at the same time. Because obviously you can't even get construction vehicles in a 5-foot right of way. And that to me is not an existing homeowner who's trying to put another home behind them. That's a developer who's building, taking one lot, subdividing it and putting 2 houses on it. So I don't, and that also means that whoever lives in that rear lot is going to be parking on the street. And so, I mean, just some things to consider. That might be fine. Maybe that's a new way we want to allow for these changes. But I know staff recommended a 12-foot width, which would give you vehicle and utility access to that rear lot. So just personally, doing a lot of real estate litigation, a 5-foot right away sounds like big lawsuit coming at you.
I think that was already resolved and some of
But
them,
I'd like to say Sage, I was mixed up.
yeah, it's not really 5 feet anymore. I think the new
Yeah.
one's 10
And
to
all the
12.
reason, okay, another reason I wanted to talk, because I wanted to piggyback on what Esther was talking about when she talked about the 5-foot lot. And I think the problem there is what has happened is a lot of the lots here in Asheville, basically, and like I said, I wish we could get numbers. Average, the smaller lots are 50, but a lot of the lots, because for some reason or another, they're running like 46, 48 instead of 50. So when I spoke with Barry about that particular, issue, that sort of, I guess we sort of have to look and see how many lots are impacted because of a couple of feet that cannot take advantage of this situation. So I do think that 5 is definitely too little. I like the 10 issue, but since most of the lots are 50 and you've got some 48, 46, how do we address those? I think that's something that we may need to look at too. Because I think it can be a game changer for the community, because like I said, a lot of the lots are 50 by 110. So that's pretty much useless land that we're leaving on the table. So.
I'm just a little bit confused. Esther, were you referring to the flagpole, the width of the flagpole, or the actual lot?
Oh, the width of the flagpole.
Okay, yeah.
Gary's initial proposal was to allow the flagpole to be as narrow as 5 feet, and I just
Okay, got it.
I mean, that to me only serves. Well, anyway, I think that's probably unwise. And I know, as we get into this, I'd like to probably also talk more about the issue of being hooked up to sewer, because I guess under Barry's proposal, he's contemplating flagpole lots that can be supported by septic. And I'm not sure that we promote development within the city limits that's supported by septic, and I'm not sure that's a good idea. So plus you're going to need a larger lot anyway for septic, so it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But
it sounds like there's just, I don't know, I'm doing a lot of listening right now. I've been making a lot of calls to dig into this, but it sounds like there's still a lot of questions and like a whole other layer to peel back to explore. That makes me just wonder if we're ready for this and if a committee digging into it is worthwhile. I mean, at the big picture conceptual level, I'm excited about the potential here, and we like got to dig into the details. And even now, like I'm trying to piece together what was officially sent to us, what was then sent this morning, and 5 and 12 and 20. Like I'm not even sure like what the proposal is on the table from staff yet. I don't feel like I've read that yet, which makes me hard. It's hard to weigh in. And like, if we get that tomorrow, then yeah, I'll do my due diligence. But it just seems like there's been a lot of like shifting sands on this, which just makes me wonder, like, do we just need more time to bake this for ultimate decision-making? So that's a comment. And then the other thought, Sage, you brought something up earlier that I really love the idea of, and something that I remember from a while ago. I think it was just called like a builders forum, and staff and DSD hosted it and electeds went. And it's just similar. Like I'm hearing from different mission oriented builders who are saying, I live in this community. I love this community. I want to help with the affordable housing crisis, and just learning about some of the barriers they have. And my first question is like, cool, like how does staff see that? Like just that dialogue where there can be a time to really surface a bunch of things and hear it back and forth, right? Because, you know, there's your side, my side, and the truth, if you will, you know, like to really dialogue about it from the building community. Because I think a lot of people we have a lot of good people want to do the right thing. So I just think that would be a really cool thing to pilot sometime soon, because when we did that last, our market was radically different and our challenges were. So it could be a nice time, whether it's routinely or just in the next 3 to 6 months, just get one on the book so we can all be part of a learning process.
Maggie has put in the chat, she would like us to make a decision about whether or not we're going to consider this Tuesday night or not, so that we can let people know.
Maggie
Burleson. Yeah, Maggie Burleson, I'm sorry, the clerk.
Well, I would like to say myself, that's you're saying that. I do understand the need for more education and communication on this, but I think it's something that we really need to look into for the community. So, I mean, I'm fine with spending more time with input and, good input and whatever we need to do. But I think that at the end, with more education we can give people, and I really believe that it will be a benefit. So.
I support that. Maybe like a friendly amendment to it is like suggest a delay, and then right now we pick like, and it will be back next meeting or 2 meetings from now, something so that barring unforeseen circumstances, we just communicate that we're excited for having the conversation, but need a little bit more time. So, staff, yes, the next meeting work.
So is the question on the table, if delaying it until the next meeting is enough time? Is that what you're asking?
It's how much time, if we want more time, but we don't want like 6 months, like we feel an urgency, but we're asking a lot.
Yes.
So how could you turn it around, understanding it's hard to do more work?
So what I can say to you is we're not going to be able to engage with the community on their schedule and meet their needs in 2.5 weeks or a month. But what we can do is we can start that process. So it's really up to council on when I'm sorry to do this, but it is up to you on when you want to hear this item. If you want to give it a little bit more time so we can meet with the Neighborhood Advisory Committee the night before the 24th and get information from them. We also, as was mentioned earlier, are planning to meet with the Legacy Neighborhood Coalitions and have let the applicant or the petitioner know that they can come to us with both of those meetings. We can do that piece of it, but we definitely aren't going to be able to sit down and have meaningful conversations with a lot of different groups, including developers, by November 14th. I just want to make sure you understand it will be some engagement, but perhaps not as much as others will desire.
I would hope that this is important enough of an issue that I think we need to take the time to really have a discussion of this, because as noted, it can, because this is mostly infill development, it can impact the character of existing and established in legacy neighborhoods. I applaud the petitioners' effort to be creative in terms of ways to address affordable housing issues. But I still think that maybe at least 30 to 45 days would be adequate. But I'm not trying to slow this up. I am trying to do it in a way that we all feel good about what we heard from the community, as well as potentially mitigating impact on our existing community fabric. So I'll stop there.
I'm going to underscore what Deborah said and remind everybody that in that time period comes the most important holidays to everyone in the community. So please take that into consideration.
Councilwoman Roney?
I'm still curious if we can bring it forward with the missing middle just to keep it in the engagement timeline, but not necessarily adding more capacity or separate engagement, but like to bring a coalition and maybe just congeal all the different parts. Is that taking too long? I'm just looking to not minimize.
I think it might help once we got the draft. Ms. Roney, we could determine, how this might fit in terms of other regulatory initiatives or opportunities that would be needed in the context of the broader missing middle study. But I'll defer to Steph and Chris in terms of time frame. I thought, Steph, you said that the community kind of feedback wouldn't be launched until at least January. I thought that's what I heard, but maybe.
Which seemed to be in line with considering the numerous holidays.
Yeah.
That's generally correct. We would actually be able to release the draft for people to take a look at it earlier than January.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, but actually going out and having feedback and discussions with the community about the study would not be launched until sometime in January.
We will have one advisory committee meeting, and then we will be able to summarize and synthesize and do that deeper engagement after the holidays.
Got it.
So is that all right? I mean, it sounds like if we're going to go back out there for community engagement, this is the timeline we've got. So it's either we don't do the community engagement, we move ahead now, or do it and staff has given us a proposed timeline. How about this? Does anyone object to the proposal for the community engagement as outlined by the staff just moments ago? Okay, all right, great. So this will not be on the, okay. Maggie, yes, Maggie Burleson, clerk.
I'm sorry. I understand the timeline and I will put it on the agenda that staff is requesting a continuance. We'd like to put to a date certain. Do you want me to put it on for possibly January 9 or January 23rd?
Staff would recommend the 23rd.
Okay.
Reminder, I will not be in person at that meeting. If that restricts voting, that could be a problem. I will be phoning in. Concurrent request, if there's any brainstorming around this, it really would be wonderful. And I'm pretty sure the state doesn't allow this, but if we could have programs where, lots go for to sale for owners first, like, is there any creativity in this realm as we explore these lots and parcels that could be a home ownership for low income incentive, or, just kind of think about programming as we look at it, not just overlays and lot lines,
I love that suggestion, especially if we do have some more time to process it. We could be considering what type of incentive programs are tied to it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we would want to look at what we already offer in terms of reduced fees for water hookup, or what MSD offers for sewer hookup for affordable homes. And if there's anything beyond that a city can do I think we're talking about incentivizing affordable home ownership for single family homes that would be going on these flag lots. Is that what you're saying?
Just anything creative, really. I don't know what I'm prescribing. I'm just saying, if there's any other tools out there we're not aware of that, flag lots are going into home ownership programs or local programs or low income programs, it'd be interesting to know. And I'll do a little digging too, but.
So you're not talking about as far as ownership. We're not going to restrict the owners that own it.
No restrictions, but opportunities. I'm pretty sure the answer to this will be that the state doesn't allow X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
Because that's usually the thing. And then we end up with incentive programs like we have. But I'm just curious, we should always be looking, just like it was Biden's bill that pushed this ADU financing that now California is going to push out or something. But, there's always things changing. And if we're going to take the time to slow down, let's always look at opportunities too that we may not know of currently.
That's not just for California. It's for the nation. Yeah.
Hey, Rachel, I think I'm turning it back over to you for the next item.
All right, thanks, Ben. So moving to new business. Item A under new business, City Council will receive a presentation on the disparity study conducted by Miller 3. And as a part of that new business item, Council will be asked to adopt a resolution that includes 2 key actions. First is accepting the report and disparity study recommendations made by Miller 3. And then second is extending the city's race and gender conscious contracting policy. As a quick reminder, our current business inclusion policy is scheduled to sunset on November 1st, 2023. In order to comply with federal law and the sunset provision of the policy, the city entered into a contract with Miller 3 in October of 2022 to conduct a disparity study and evaluate the city's business inclusion policy and program to make recommendations that would meet any applicable constitutional mandates appropriate to the city of Asheville. Following the council meeting on Tuesday, staff will then develop an implementation plan for the recommendations of the disparity study. The presentation that you will receive on Tuesday was previewed by the Equity and Engagement Committee at their meeting this past Tuesday and recommended adoption of the resolution at their meeting in a 3-0 vote. Barring any questions on this item, I'm going to turn it back over to Ben to cover outdoor dining.
Thank you, Rachel. So this item is going to make some updates to our existing code and fees around sidewalk dining. So we're going to look at some of the lessons that were learned through the COVID period and put those into practice. The other piece of this is it also is going to take our temporary parklet and streetery program. So that was when we allowed businesses to have access to not only parking spaces, but sometimes even streets. And what it does is it creates or transitions that very popular program into a long-term program and creates annual permitting. Planning has developed a fantastic outdoor dining guide that will help our businesses utilize these parklets in that space. And so what this does is put a program into place to allow that street activity in terms of dining, but also creates a fee structure. Number one, a fee structure that covers the staff time needed to permit these types of activities, but also creates a public use fee to make sure, for example, that if we have a parking space that's being used for a streetery or dining, that there's a fee structure in place to kind of recover the lost cost of those parking revenues. So basically what it does is set up a permanent program that really incorporates the lessons that we learned as a city and a community from our COVID period. So this has actually been to 2 council committees, so a number of council members have already seen a pretty detailed overview of this. Went to Planning and Economic Development Committee in September. That committee voted 3-0 to move it forward. Went to Policy, Finance, and Human Resources in October. They too voted unanimously to move it forward. And finally, it's also been to our Multimodal Transportation Committee and our Downtown Commission, and they both those advisory boards voted unanimously to move this forward. So it's been a very well vetted and constructive policy that'll come to council for final approval next week. Any questions on outdoor dining and streeteries? Councilwoman Roney.
Something that came to my attention was a question about, will these fees, and I know there's a lot of work has been put into this, cover the permitting and enforcement costs? Do we have a clear picture of that?
I think we can get information on that. Normally, we try to have our user fees cover that, but we will definitely, and permitting, we will definitely get you a response to that.
And I think one of the reasons why there's more curiosity, I expected this would have a lot of support, and I want to support our local and small businesses too. But I'm also curious about who has access to this process when we look at folks who may lose access to right of way if we're having ADA compliance issues and or don't have access because of limitations to access to capital. So I think we could be expecting some public comment, though. If we haven't heard it already, perhaps not.
Thank you for that. Councilman Roney and staff will review that and be prepared to discuss on Tuesday. Okay, and just to keep our kind of rhythm going, I'm going to cover the last item on the agenda. This is we are having to do a reappointment of a previous Planning and Zoning Commission appointment. What we have, and I learned that this is not only in the UDO, but it's actually in a 2013 session law from the General Assembly. City of Asheville, you have to appoint 5 members of your Planning and Zoning Commission that are residents of the City of Asheville. The other 2 members are appointed by the county commissioners, and they must live within 1 mile of the municipal city limits. Even though we no longer have ETJ, that still remains our appointment structure for that board. In this case, we had a resident that I think inadvertently checked city resident on his application. It turns out he actually does not live in the city, so we're going to have to find another appointment that does live in the city, and that will go to boards and commissions. Or no, it has been to boards and commissions, but has not, Maggie? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Ben, so even though we don't have an ETJ anymore, you're saying the county appoints 2 members of our P&Z still?
They do. That's not only in our ordinance, but that is in that session law from 2013.
Oh, okay, because I looked at the general statutes, but so we need to get that local bill fixed. I mean, maybe we have no shot at it, but it seems like it should be fixed since we don't have an ETJ anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if Brad wants to add anything to that piece.
I think you covered it well. I just wanted to point out for anybody who's listening or anybody who wants to take a look at that, it is Session Law 2013-30, just for specifics here. That, again, has been around prior to the elimination of our ETJ, would have matched those limitations, but it remains good law as a separate piece of legislation from the ETJ.
So all that to say, the applicant that is not able to serve at this time, they would be able to I think, we'll have to see if he lives within 1 mile of the city limits, but could be a county appointment in the future, potentially. Councilman Roney.
So I know that we are able to choose from the candidates that were interviewed already, but maybe I missed something. Which applicant was not eligible? That would help me understand which ones remain eligible.
It was Mr. Alvarez. And the documents that council will be receiving today will have a list of all the eligible candidates.
Like, I think it was Alvarez Abernathy was the full name of the candidate. Yes.
And then the follow-up question I would have are any of the applicant or any of the current members, the two that are appointed by the county, in fact, in the city limits, might we consider them for the city appointment and then maintain that position for our appointment of Mr. Alvarez?
Yeah, I see Steph is still on the call, so we will absolutely take a look at that and include that in any follow-up materials. Thank you.
I know we may have different rules for planning and zoning. I just know that we've done that with other boards and commissions, so that would be helpful to know.
I think, Rachel, that concludes our business agenda, so I'll turn it back over to you for the rest of the briefing agenda.
Thank you, Ben. So as Deborah mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, we only have one council committee agenda to brief you on today, and that is environment and safety. And I'm going to let the city manager cover that briefing.
Thank you, Rachel. So Environment and Safety Committee meeting will be this Tuesday at 11 o'clock. And we have only 3 items. One item is for action by the committee. If you have the attachment, we will have an update on the EEOP, and that's the Emergency Operations Plan, and the Continuity of Operations Plan will be an update by AFD staff. And the next item would be a quarterly update. We are trying to reconstitute those updates from the Asheville Police Department, and APD staff will be presenting that. Essentially quarterly crime stats, and it is going to be a little bit more comprehensive than we did last week with 2 weeks ago with our public safety initiative update. This will go into detail about crime stats by districts and just dig a little deeper into that crime data. And the last, which is going to be an action that we are requesting from the committee of discussing the community responder program and the transition of that program to a permanent program. We are asking, and I think I have telegraphed this on a number of occasions, asking support of this program by use of opioid settlement funding. We want to expand this initiative to provide peer support, resources, and additional firefighters. So we will be discussing that with the committee. You all may or may not recall that this effort in terms of community responder program was first discussed in at the time Public Safety Committee, and we wanted to kind of go slow, understand this from a pilot perspective, and from the emails that I've been getting with regards to this initiative, it has had resounding success and support from the community, and even from our firefighters feel that they are certainly doing good in the community, and we highly recommend that this program be would transition to a permanent service that we provide to the community. And that will be it. And it is unusual for our committees to have 2 public comments, but we do for environment and safety. So there'll be a public comment at the beginning of the meeting and then one at the end. And that will conclude that agenda.
Thank you, Deborah. So moving on, we're going to briefly go through the 8-week look ahead. We've already made reference to some upcoming holidays, and as a result of those holidays, we only have 1 meeting in November and 1 meeting in December. Our meeting in November is November 14th. As we discussed as part of the consent agenda for next week, the first item on the agenda for November 14th will be a work session starting at 3:30 p.m., which will be part 2 of the facilities assessment presentation that you heard previously from Walter Ear. As part of the business meeting on the consent agenda, the City Council will be asked to allocate $50,000 in strategic partnership grant funds that are available from a previous round of funding. The Equity and Engagement Committee at their special called meeting on Friday the 13th of last week approved that funding to be allocated to Peak Academy, and so want to get approval from full City Council as we finalize that agreement with the agency. Also wanted to note that on November 14th, it's not currently listed on the 8-week look ahead, but we do plan to provide the annual report presentation to full City Council. The agenda was just too full for the October 24th meeting to have it go forward this coming Tuesday. Briefly, for December 12th, wanted to note that we have a work session starting at 3:30, which will be the FY 2025 CIP discussion, as well as our initial discussion with Council on 2024 GEO bond planning. Part of the presentation section of that agenda during the business meeting, you will receive a presentation on our FY 2023 audit. And then after December 12th, City Council does not meet again until January 9th. So barring any discussion on the 8-week look ahead, I'm actually going to invite Emily Ball to pull up her presentation and provide an overview on Code Purple and our short-term shelter strategy.
Good morning. Glad to be with you all this morning. We have 2 agenda items that have already been discussed that will be on your consent agenda for next Tuesday related to Code Purple. So just wanted to share some additional information about what that Code Purple plan will look like for the coming winter. As you all are familiar with, Code Purple is a longstanding community initiative that provides life-saving emergency shelter for folks who are experiencing homelessness during extreme weather conditions. This year, the Code Purple season has began on October 15th. Shelter will be provided by ABCCM and Salvation Army. And this winter's plan includes 16 more beds than were available last year and an expanded definition of Code Purple that will provide more shelter nights than ever before. So really exciting capacity as we go into this coming winter season. As with last year, both the city and the county have budgeted matching funds to support Code Purple operations, and the county has requested that the city administer their funds. The Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee, or HIAC, has approved a funding request from ABCCM and is recommending full funding. So the 2 action items for your consideration next week will be the interlocal agreement with the county and a contract with ABCCM for that funding. And then lastly, Code Purple Shelter will augment the recently funded year-round 43 shelter beds, which are contracting now and should be available in the next several weeks. And I'll share an update about the status of those. Again, Code Purple overview began in 2009 from local shelter providers to provide extra beds with fewer requirements during freezing temperatures. So during Code Purple events, barriers like ID requirements or sobriety requirements are lowered to ensure safety and literally to save lives. Shelter participation is voluntary, and Code Purple shelter providers change year after year. And traditionally, the Homeless Coalition calls Code Purple when the forecast indicates that the temperature will be at or below 32 degrees. We have worked with the Homeless Initiative Advisory Committee and the Homeless Coalition in developing this winter's plan, and they have made some recommendations around best use of budgeted funds from both the city and the county to support Code Purple. Quick highlights of the plan for Code Purple this year. Again, the Code Purple is already available as of October 15th when the weather conditions pertain, and will be available through April 30th of 2024. The shelter beds that are available are 2 locations from ABCCM. The Veterans Restoration Quarters will have 50 beds available. That's the same number of beds that they had last year. And ABCCM's Transformation Village will have 25 beds available. Last year, they had 50 beds available, but the highest census they had on any night was only 18. So even though this looks like a decrease in the number of beds available there, it's actually just right sizing based on what the need was demonstrated to be last year. And then new this winter, Salvation Army is participating and is providing 16 beds. So that's 16 additional beds. And all of those locations do have the capacity for overflow beds if needed. Last winter, right around Christmas, we had that Arctic front that came through where there were really extreme conditions, very dangerous conditions. And ABCCM was able to scale at the Veterans Restoration Quarters, for example, from 50 beds to 89 people in during that season. So all locations are prepared to scale up if needed. Code Purple, as always, will be available when the temperature is 32 or below based on the forecast on weather.gov. So always looking at that single source. And new this year, Code Purple will also be available when the temperature is between 33 and 40 degrees with precipitation. So specifically looking at cold and wet conditions and making sure that there's extra shelter capacity available then. That will also be based on the forecast. Homeless coalition leaders and shelter providers will coordinate based on the forecast to make those decisions and then announce that as usual. Homeless coalition leadership will call Code Purple 48 hours in advance and will announce that via email. Anyone in the community can be added to their distribution list to receive those notifications, and that email address is available here. And then when the notification comes out, providers certainly will share that information with folks who are seeking shelter. Here at the city, we will post that on the city's website and the HCCA marquee. The county will share via text alert. And another new addition this year is that ABCCM will provide a reported message on a dedicated phone line so folks can call in to find out whether or not Code Purple is available that night. ART will provide free transit to and from Code Purple locations, and community responders and community paramedics will be available to assist with transportation when needed. That particularly applies for folks who may have mobility limitations or may need after-hours transport. All of the details operationally about Code Purple are in the Code Purple manual, and that's available on the city's website and has also been shared out with the community. Funding for Code Purple. So for the second year, both the city and the county have budgeted funds for Code Purple. The city's approved fiscal year budget includes $50,000 for Code Purple, and the county has also budgeted to match the city's funding. Counties requested that the city administer their Code Purple funding. This is the same process that we had last year, and they've provided an interlocal agreement to that effect for consideration. So we published the combined $100,000 funding opportunity and received one request from ABCCM for that full amount to support their operations. HIAC, we followed our typical process with HIAC for reviewing that request, and they did recommend full funding at their October 12th meeting. Salvation Army has indicated that they have the ability to absorb Code Purple costs in their regular operating budget. And as you know, Salvation Army was one of the 3 shelters recently funded through ARPA funds with city and county funding for preserving their existing beds and adding some new beds. So within that operating budget, they believe they'll be able to support Code Purple operations. Speaking of Salvation Army, again, one of the 3 agencies that was funded through city and county ARPA funds. And so as a reminder, Code Purple capacity that I just described is in addition to these nightly beds that will be available for a 12-month period to providing a combined 43 shelter beds. So there are 3 providers that were awarded funding through this process. Haywood Street is adding 3 beds. They are currently finishing construction. They're adding 3 physical new beds. So currently finishing construction and anticipating that those beds will be online by the end of October. Salvation Army is adding 20 beds and also preserving the 45 beds that were at risk of closure. They are hiring staff. They, of course, will need additional staff to provide shelter for those 20 additional people. And so they're in that process right now. They currently anticipate that those beds will be available at the beginning of November. And then Safe Shelter is adding 20 beds. 10 of those are for families and 10 for single individuals. Their original proposal, Safe Shelter is a collaborative of 3 local churches, and their original proposal was that they would rotate between those 3 locations. They recently have been reconfiguring some of their operations and looking to secure a single location for the first 6 months rather than rotating to provide some additional stability for the people who are receiving shelter there. They have been talking with Homeward Bound and are currently developing a lease agreement with Homeward Bound to use AHOPE after hours. AHOPE, of course, is only open early daytime hours, and so they've been discussing using that facility after hours. Populations would not overlap, so they would not be operating shelter at the same time as AHOPE operations. And to be clear, AHOPE would not be the operator. This is specifically a lease agreement for using that space for this purpose. Safe Shelter has applied for a temporary use permit for that and has also begun neighborhood engagement.
Emily, would this be in terms of the clients? This would be a shelter for what type of population, the demographics, if you could explain that.
Safe Shelter's proposal is 10 family beds and 10 single individual beds. And I should also mention that all of their shelter participants will be referral only. So these won't be folks who are walking up seeking shelter, but will be connected to that shelter opportunity by a provider. They shared some information yesterday about their operational plan if they're able to open shelter at AHOPE. AHOPE is a 3-story building, so they're looking at keeping families on one floor and single individuals on a separate floor, so those populations wouldn't be intermingling. And they also, again, folks would be leaving the shelter in the morning before AHOPE hours open, so wouldn't be connected with that AHOPE population. Single individuals certainly would be able to access AHOPE services if they wanted to do that during regular AHOPE hours. But their experience, what Safe Shelter reported to the shelter work group yesterday, is that their experience in the past is that most of their folks were working, and so we're leaving early in the morning anyway to get to that employment.
And can you explain a little bit more about begun neighborhood engagement? Is that talking to businesses? If you can elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So they have the Safe Shelter staff and leadership team have begun reaching out to the folks on North Ann Street and in that surrounding area to share this proposed plan with them and vision and help them understand who would be in shelter there and how that would work. Their approach is that they would be activating that space. They'd be able to provide certainly staff support during those operational hours. So they want to share information with folks in the neighborhood about who their population is, what that shelter operation would look like, and provide clear contact information and just let folks understand what they are seeking to pursue. This is, I think a lot of people in our community are familiar with the Room in the Inn model from the past, and this is sort of an updated version of Room in the Inn, but in a single location. So I think will be really helpful for them to be able to share that information with folks in that area.
Thank you, Emily.
Councilwoman Roney.
Thank you for this update, Emily. I'm enthusiastic about the 2 good news reports we heard today. One is that we're going to have a hotline. From my experience riding the bus and helping connect people with resources, just because of being in proximity, trying to get information, even with all the information I already have, has been a challenge in the past. I didn't see the hotline listed. How would someone like a service provider or somebody who's just in proximity find out about the hotline? Is it available yet now that Code Purple is already in effect?
It is, and it's in that Code Purple manual. So all of the details about Code Purple are in that manual. The manual's on the city's website and has been shared out through the Homeless Coalition in HIAC.
Okay. That would be great for, once again, everybody who has access to how to find that, even like language like Code Purple. I wonder if we might consider also adding like sort of like an emergency bulletin. Sometimes we'll put it at the top of our city website or something so that the public could also add it for information would be a suggestion. The second thing that's just tremendous, because we've gotten a lot of feedback over the years about this, is that inclement weather kind of policy where if it's between 33 and 40 degrees and there's precipitation, then there also may be an update. So I'm hoping that folks will, help us give feedback on how this is working. For example, if there's an inclement weather change and we use the hotline, does it work? So when folks have that kind of feedback, what's the best direction to point folks into?
I am always happy to receive that feedback myself and share that with the appropriate party. The key folks in this operation are Homeless Coalition leadership, as well as, of course, ABCCM and Salvation Army. So any of those folks would be appropriate to reach out to. But again, I'm happy to be a conduit for that. The plan was developed through a work group over a series of 4 meetings, and that work group will continue to meet throughout the season. That's a process improvement this year compared to the past. So we'll debrief after we have a couple of Code Purple incidents, just understand where there are opportunities to improve, and we'll continue to meet throughout the season. So again, I'm happy to be the pass through for that kind of feedback.
And for anyone who's curious about how to do that best, it has been so easy to just Google City of Asheville homelessness and to find staff contact information there.
Okay, thank you, Emily. So in the interest of time, next on the agenda, we referenced in the previous presentation the recent action that City Council took obligating about $875,000 of our remaining ARPA funds. After that recent council action, we've now got about $500,000 in ARPA funding remaining. And so Kim Marmon-Sachs is going to walk you through a quick overview of what has been obligated to date from ARPA. And as the city manager referenced at the beginning of today's meeting, we're then going to be seeking some feedback from the city council on the process you want us to take to consider the obligation of those remaining roughly $500,000. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim now.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to update you on the situation that we're in currently with ARPA. Let me just actually get to a screenshot. I don't know if somebody else was actually showing the presentation, but bear with me 1 second.
Kim, I'm happy to share it if that's easier for you.
Yeah, if you would, Alison, then then that's easier to just move that on. Okay, next slide, please. As you all know, we had the $26.3 million in the federal grant. It was made available to local governments, and we took the decision to do subrecipients from us as a subrecipient. So to date, we have 27 external projects and 3 City of Asheville projects totaling $24.9 million. So that leaves the 501,384 unobligated. Over the last 2 years, we have had additional requests to utilize the funds. And we're in a situation now where, as we've gone through the last 2 years, with getting everybody under contract, getting the projects rolling, and actually getting the reporting now from those projects, we're now in a situation to say, what do we want to do with the remaining allocation of the funds, and what does the City Council want to do going forward? Next slide, please. This is just the next 2 slides are just a reminder of what the goals were and what the allowable usages were, and the timeline. So we're in a situation where those funds have to be obligated and expended by December the 31st, 2026. So we still have just over 2 years of that. And then the final reporting that we have to do to the Treasury is April the 30th. That's the last quarter's reporting. And that's 2027. Next slide, please. And I think these were just the criteria and the award process, just as a reminder. That's the situation. Next slide, please. So this is off of the dashboard that we have running on the website. So this is all the projects that we have funded thus far. The ones in green with the in progress at the end are all the ones that are actually running currently. And then there is 2 that are not, well, actually 4, but counted as 2 different projects. Step Up on 2nd Street for Ramada Inn. We're still waiting for the situation with the Ramada Inn to be moving forward. So the contract with Step Up as wraparound services for that is still waiting to move forward. They say that at the moment they're going to be ready to go to contract early 2024. So we're just waiting and working with them on that. So we're ready when they're ready to get that under contract. And then the ones that Emily just talked about, the 3 for the Hayek shelter, we are working currently with them. Salvation Army have been through the kickoff process, and we have the contract going around with them as an organization to sign before it goes to our seamless docs. We've been waiting for Safe Shelter just to work out their new structure as they're going to go forward. So we have a kickoff with them on Tuesday next week. And as soon as the kickoff is done, then that contract will be going around. And then Haywood will be, if they're available, the kickoff will be the end of next week. I think it's on the 27th. For Haywood Street. So those all should be under contract and ready to go in our timeline by the end of October. So as soon as those organizations are ready to go with their shelter beds, then we should be good to go with those as well. Next slide. And next slide, that's just the way that it's laid out at the moment. Next slide, please, Alison. Okay, so we received the 26,293,853. That was our total that we received, and thus far we have allocated close to 26 million. So the remaining funds are 501,384. Next slide. So we have had a number of additional requests from the existing subrecipients. So I think the choices that are in front of you at the moment are what you want to do to allocate the remaining money. These are, I think there's 3 options really. Looking at additional requests from the existing subrecipients, looking at new requests that have come in, and also the other option is to hold off from using the remaining funds and look to actually allocate it in the next fiscal budgeting process. So, yeah, sorry, Kim. Sorry, Councilman Maroney.
You may bring this up later. I'm curious if we're going to look at additional requests, what our equity and feasibility scoring rubric looks like beside it at the same time would be really helpful.
Okay, I mean, and we have obviously the initial evaluation that we did that had the equity elements built in, and also we had obviously the additional rubric that we had when we were doing the evaluation to make sure that equity was evaluated as a high priority. So we still have those existing evaluation scores from anybody that was an existing subrecipient or RFP applicant. If we were going to look at new applicants, then we would have to apply a similar kind of the same rubric as we used for the RFP application, just to make sure that A, they're eligible, and B, that they're following the same priorities that we put in on the RFP process.
Thank you.
So these are additional requests from subrecipients, from existing subrecipients. They over the time, people have come to me to say, they need more funds, or could we look at this? And I receive emails often. I received one this morning as well, which I'll talk about in the next slide. But just to give you an idea of existing subrecipients that have asked for more funds and the reasons why. Everybody so far of the subrecipients that we had from the RFP is being very successful in the way that they're utilizing the money, the way that they're reporting, and the information that we're giving back to the Treasury has all been. We've been using this last year to make sure that everybody is on track and supported accordingly, but they're all doing exceptionally well. Next slide, please. So we have had a new request, a formal new request from the Peak Academy. We have a number of new requests, but nobody else at the moment has put it formally into writing. So this is the an existing new request that is formally in writing. I had one this morning, an email came through from Asheville Buncombe Community Land Trust, who were in the original RFP. They had heard that there may be some new look at how we were going to expend the money, and they have said that they would like to be considered to also be considered for some of the funds. But I just got that email this morning, so I have not added that to the slides at this moment. Next slide, please. So yeah, so that's basically the situation. We possible options for consideration on how to allocate the funds is to look at another competitive process similar to the one that we used before with the RFP, without actually opening a whole new RFP, but doing a competitive process, or allocate to subrecipients and or other requests without reopening the process. I think basically that's the options for consideration, or to decide to hold off until the next budget year. Next slide. I think the next slide is just so we've received additional requests to utilize the funds, and we're just trying to find out what is your preferred option for how we move forward. Councilwoman Mosley, sorry.
Can you go back to the slide about peak? I saw something about 2024. I just want to. So this one, is there ask for funding so that they can use it, provide the services for this school year?
That's correct.
It's for this school year, yes, to sustain them going through this school year.
Okay, thanks.
Kim, on that first list, can you go up one slide? The Homeward Bound, wasn't there a reason that it was 9999900? Like, didn't we max them out?
Yes, we did on their initial application, because of the nature of the application. There was $1 million. It was $1 million. It wasn't that we couldn't go past the $1 million, but the reporting process for anybody over $1 million within certain eligibility categories, the amount of reporting that we had to do over $1 million, we decided that was too great an ask for us and also any of our subrecipients. But that was the reason why.
So they weren't actually ineligible. We just didn't want to do the paperwork. So this is an okay ask. They're not at some threshold.
No, that's correct. Yes, it was to do with the level of reporting that you had to do over $1 million for certain categories and certain eligibility. So we decided across the board that anybody in that category with that eligibility, we would restrict to below the $1 million, so that we didn't have to do that. They didn't have to do the reporting, because the reporting was fairly onerous over $1 million.
Kim, it looks like Councilmember Roney has her hand raised.
Thank you. I am curious, and I'm glad we're having this conversation at the same day. Is there any way that there's potential for funding cascading, that the CDBG funds we talked about earlier could help fill the gap for the permanent supportive housing, because it looks like it would fall within our timeline restraints. Having toured the facility, it seemed that there were multiple reasons why the costs had a shortfall for the Homeward Bound, but there are things that will directly impact the quality of life for the residents and ultimately be a cost savings in our partnership. And I wonder if it's possible our CBDG funds or other funds might fill this gap, then the Peak Academy we would have more to work with. So if we had a better picture, then I would be more ready to make a decision today for giving direction.
I mean, I think, I don't know what the eligibility is of the CDBG money, but if there could be a cascade, then, as far as I'm concerned, for ARPA, that would be.
And I can answer that if it's helpful, Kim. So, because we did consider that absolutely when we were aware of Homeward Bound's need for funding. And so staff met with Homeward Bound. We toured the facility with Dennis Newburn, our division manager, and other community development staff. The challenge there is that because the project is already complete, the infusion of community development funds would just simply not work, because the community development funds have cross-cutting federal requirements, such as prevailing wage standards, environmental review standards. And so what you're seeing is that ARPA has a little bit more flexibility, but CDBG does not. So we were unable to, we certainly looked at that, but it was unable to work because of those reasons.
Thank you, Nikki.
And is that also the case for things like, Greenbelt Alliance?
To my knowledge, we have not considered other requests for those CDBG funds. So we haven't done the due diligence on these projects for those CDBG funds.
Okay, I think I was just trying to think about resource mapping for multi-solving here. I'm sure that you all have looked at that as well.
Councilwoman Holman, you have a question?
Yeah, and if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like you're asking for kind of some input on what process we're interested in. And I don't know, I think, in my day job, I am a funder. And I think fairness is pretty important. And so I'm excited about the people who are savvy enough to be tracking how much was left in the pot. And I think their proposals and what their interest is really cool. But just because they were tracking it, that we would go to them without some other type of process that was accessible to others feels a little out of sync, especially because the first round of this had that type of process. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
I hear that, Maggie. This is Kim. And I'm also just curious, because we would be stepping out of our process. We had some really high ranked equity and feasibility projects that haven't received any funding yet. And so I know that could create some additional layers of discussion for community engagement and trust building.
And on top of that, the city itself has its own initiatives that, one concern I have, just thinking about the process, this is pretty difficult. It's not that much money at this point relative to what we initially received, but I know the county is holding back ARPA funds for a high access shelter. We're committed to implementing the National Alliance on Homelessness recommendations, and I worry a little bit about when those conversations ripen. I know that on a staff level, they're moving ahead with the recommendations that we already saw at a council level, which will be looking for a permanent location for a high access shelter, and also determining what functions will be housed in this multi-use facility. I just think about the potential to need funds to contribute to that for capital. I don't have strong feelings one way or another. I'm just a little concerned that we'll be sitting there when that happens thinking, well, we don't, we don't have any resources to contribute to that.
Well, yeah, we originally talked about 3 million and it's faded away. So I wonder what that means for our partnership. So I feel like there are a couple of commitments. One is to the community who originally applied, and now we're skipping that process too, in addition to our commitments to the county and our community around access shelter.
So my thought is, on one hand, I look at it like we've already allocated money to some groups. And frankly, some of those groups are ones that we tend to fund on a regular basis. What concerns me about PEAK is the fact that it's specifically for this year. So I'm wondering what happens to their program without funding. That's one consideration. And I'm also wondering if there are other pots of money available for PEAK Academy. I'm really glad that we are going to be voting on the strategic partnership, but I suspect they asked for the $500,000 for a reason. Just like other organizations, money, I suspect PEAK is in dire need. And so I would at least like to see an equity assessment to see how high PEAK would score on an equity assessment, and then maybe we can compare to all of the other applicants. That's just a thought I have.
And the other thing, and I know, Sage, you have your hand up, but I would like Kim to also talk about eligibility only from the perspective of linking the use of the funding, the ARPA funds, to COVID relief, or sort of responding to challenges related to COVID under the ARPA guidelines. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yes, thank you, Deborah. And we have a little bit of a challenge with it because the PEAK Academy actually only opened its doors in August 2021. And we received the funds for the COVID recovery in May 2021. So as far as COVID recovery, in their letter, there was no reference to COVID recovery. As an entity, as they stand, they would be eligible for funds in that they are in a category that is eligible, and they are not for profit, so they would be eligible on that level. I think it's a stretch at the minute to put it into COVID recovery. That being said, we obviously have revenue replacement with COVID recovery, and so we could, if the choice was to fund them, then we could actually put it through revenue replacement. Directly going through ARPA with the eligibility criteria, I think it would be a bit of a stretch, is what is my opinion, because it didn't open their doors until August 2021. So
we're saying that we'll figure it out if that's the road that we want to go down, but we just need to make certain that you all know that there's a little work to do in order to make those correlations and have that funding be the eligible source. I think Sage and then Maggie.
Just to chime in on process, because I feel like the PEAK Academy thing in particular, I need some more information on. Maybe it's in my inbox. I'm not seeing it right now, but I mean, I guess I thought they were getting the same per student revenue that all the other schools. I don't know if something happened. So I don't feel like I have enough information. But process-wise, it seems like an application period and being able to evaluate everybody in it. This kind of idea that we would look at applications from several years ago and just advance them or fill voids or work with this select team that reached out to us or applicants. It just doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to slow the needs down, especially if one of them has a really pertinent, timely need. But it does seem like we need a better process. And to follow up on what Antoinette said, I'd be curious too. I mean, if PEAK needs us to get through this year, what does that mean for next year? I spent a lot of time on school board finance meetings and committees, and I'm just kind of curious overall. So more information in general. Maybe if he is listening and I could speak with them in general and directly.
If I could come and answer that as well. When I looked at the application, and I think if Tony's on the line, he may have an opinion about this. But yeah, this again, we're in a situation where this one-off funding could present a funding cliff in a very short time for someone like Peak Academy, because the sustainability on the information that they provided us with, it would feel like, yes, that they would need some funds pretty desperately in order to carry on after these one-off funds that are coming, one-time funds that are coming from something like ARPA. I think we would have to understand a little bit more about the sustainability, because I think we are going to be in a situation with them that they would be in danger of getting in a funding cliff in short order.
Maggie?
I want to loop back to Esther. The point that you made was pretty good about we have a pretty long list of capital needs also, whether it's for the shelter or other things. And the reality that the amount of staff time it would take to, like, I think it's good for us to analyze how much time it would take for an open and fair process, how many grants that would yield, and like, is that public staff time effort worth the yield? You know, when we were administering $26 million, that made a lot of sense to have a big investment with process, and all these grantees or these applicants would put in a lot of time, but $500,000 in the scheme of our $200 million budget is very small. And so it does make me wondering if there's a lens where staff could bring us some proposals from our capital needs that match, and that we follow through with existing public priorities and use this, which would then reduce administration time and just get this money into the community fast as possible.
And again, we're just seeking a little bit of feedback and direction, and maybe what we could possibly do is to bring back something to you all to say, what about this as the actual process? I think I'm hearing a little bit of both. We kind of want it open, but we also want to be able to address immediate needs. And then thirdly, I think we're also hearing that, with our existing partners, maybe there's an opportunity. And when I say existing partners, I'm including the city of Asheville, because we are a sub-recipient as well. And yes, we can go through and look at infrastructure needs, but we just wanted to have this conversation because we are getting more and more requests for the use of this funding. And we just wanted to make sure that we had clear direction from council as to your preference in terms of deciding how to distribute the funds.
Well,
no, please, Sandra, tell us what you're thinking on this one.
I'm sorry. Only thing I was going to say is I can understand us not having to, not going to go through the full process. Again, I think I agree with Maggie. It's only $500,000, and I think the time spent may not be our best way to do it. However, I do agree with Antoinette. If we are unable to actually help subsidize PEAK to a certain degree, are there any other avenues that we can explore to actually help in this situation? Because I will say that the one thing I can say when I visit PEAK, it is a school that's actually helping a lot of kids, minority kids, actually get the need and the attention that they need to move forward. It's a very worthwhile program, and I'd hate to see that we can help in some way to keep, it afloat. So I think that from that point of view, I think if there's any way the city, other than ARPA funds, if we can't utilize ARPA funds, to actually keep that in mind as something that we could sort of look at, some kind of way that we could help with the situation. I think that would be great. Needed, and hopefully something that
Okay, Mayor, we've run over quite a bit and we apologize. We
Yeah,
have a
so
lengthy
on this one,
agenda.
I know Kim had to jump off. I mean, maybe what we do, we've heard this presentation, kind of heard that you need some direction. I feel like I'm sensing people sort of marinating and thinking about it. Why don't we touch base on this one again at our next agenda review and see if we have any more clear thoughts on it.
That sounds good.
Hopefully we do.
Yeah, and if you all don't mind, we might actually even also reach out to you all individually, or I'll discuss it when we have some of my one-on-ones. So yeah, we'll do follow-up.
Share one thought, if it matters at all. Hearing Maggie point out the amount of staff work that would go into the $500,000, I kind of agree. So if it all helps to move me over into the list of people that would like to see what our immediate needs are before we look outside, I also agree with that as well. I know we have a lot going on to take on a whole nother process.
Sounds good. All right, Mayor, if there aren't any other questions, we will also be reaching out to Peak Academy so we can get a little bit more detailed information about their request as well. All right, I think, Mayor,
Thank you. All right.
we're done.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.